This week on the Wheelhouse. Election Edition Part 2. We're talking West Haven. For Connecticut Public Radio, I'm Frankie Graziano. This is the Wheelhouse, the show that connects politics to the people. We got your weekly dose of politics in Connecticut and beyond, right here. We're back on the campaign trail in Connecticut ahead of November. God, that's in 2 weeks. Oh my God, Election Day's in 3 weeks. We're making stops in local cities to cover mayoral races, but stick with us for all your election-related needs all the way up to November 7th and into 2024. Today, we go to West Haven, and there's a lot of great things in West Haven, like Ed McCarthy's Blue Devils, Savin Rock Park, Zuppardi's Pizza. Yum, that's yummy. But lately, they've been overshadowed a little bit by turmoil at City Hall, a financial crisis, and a scandal involving COVID relief dollars. We're going to ask candidates for mayor about it shortly. Both Democratic nominee Dorinda and Republican nominee Barry Lee Cohen are here with us, and you'll be able to call in and ask them any questions you have, too. Call 888-720-9677 right now with your questions. And I want to remind folks that these informational kind of question and answer sessions we are holding are legit. A great, legit effort into getting some of you the info you need to vote. Producer Meg Dalton has a timer going to make sure candidates get equal time. And we did a coin flip before going live to determine who's going to go first. And we're going to start with Dorinda Boer, Democratic nominee for mayor in West Haven. Good morning, Representative Boer. How are you today?
Morning, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I want you to give you an opportunity right off the top here to tell people who you are and why you want to be mayor.
Sure. Well, I've had a long career in several aspects, from auditing to personnel to marketing director. And the most recent 7 years, I've had the great pleasure of representing West Haven as a state representative. But it's been, as you mentioned, a very frustrating few years. So while I think I've been pretty successful as a state representative and have delivered a lot of funding for our city, I had asked myself, where, when you're in public service, can you be most impactful? And I think going into the city and local government and helping to move some of those projects along and bringing that state leadership down to the local level will be important in this time for West Haven.
All right, you heard us allude to it in the opening of the show. So I want to know about this recent financial scandal and how it might be likely on the minds of West Haven residents as they're thinking about voting this election cycle. Where do you stand on financial responsibility and transparency?
Well, so one of my career paths was an internal auditor, so I'm very familiar with financial controls, checks and balances, segregation of duties, and making sure we have safeguards in place for our assets. And then also transparency. This is the people's government. This is their tax dollars. They have a right to know what's going on with their funds. It's not ours, it's theirs. So making sure we have controls in place, making sure we are sharing the information. Sometimes it's good information, sometimes it's bad information, but communication is key in letting everybody know what's going on with their tax dollars.
Help me understand specific things that you could do. So you gave us your background, but specific things once you get into office that you could do, maybe leaning on your background to try to make sure that things are up and up on the financial side here with City Council.
Yeah. So, the first thing I need to do is bring in a brand new, experienced, qualified leadership team. So that's a new finance director that can run the numbers, run numbers that we can trust, and a finance director that our MARB will trust. A new city attorney that can actually negotiate contracts and close the deal, an economic development director, a grants writer. We've had a lot of gaps in a project manager. So bringing in a qualified team is really critical. And our training for our personnel and the financial controls, it's great to put financial controls in place, but we have to make sure that everybody knows about them. And my experience as a personnel director for 10 years, I have great experience with hiring the right talent, firing when necessary, oversight of workers' comp and health benefits. So making sure we have the right people in place, I think, is going to be critical. And then the background with the marketing and the promotion. I worked for United Healthcare for 10 years and traveled across the country. And so really promoting West Haven and changing our image. We all know what a great city we have, but it's time the rest of the world knows. We've been certainly overshadowed by negativity, and it's time to turn that around.
So we just talked about administration and logistics. What about the people? You just alluded to turning things around. What about a fresh start and rebuilding trust with the residents?
Yeah, so I think, my team that's running with me, we have 17 new people on the team. I think the public was looking for new faces, and we have a lot of folks that want to step up and help our community. And then those folks are going to help me in City Hall to bring a fresh team in. I think everybody's looking for change. And, if I could take a moment to talk about rebuilding that trust, I come from a strength of a state representative who has, during that crisis, worked hard, just doubled down and worked with the state to deliver on accomplishments for our city. But at the same time, on a parallel track, my opponent was sitting in the finance committee in local government on the city council during our worst crisis years and our most scandalous years, and participated in those votes, voted to give Mike DeMassa full exclusive authority over $1.2 million without any checks and balances in place, and never asked the status of the funds for a whole year. So that money walked out the door. There was no checks and balances in place.
I'm glad that we got to talk about that. So I'm glad you're talking about trust as well in there, and you got to take a moment to talk about that. But right now, we're going to take a moment to go to a caller. This is great. You're going to have an opportunity to actually talk to somebody who may be a voter in West Haven. This is Rich. What's your call? Go ahead.
Hi, Dorinda. Question about the grand list. What's on your plan for developing the grand list and helping improve the tax burden at West Haven?
That's a great question. Our grand list is about $3 billion, and we don't have a good balance between our residential property taxes and our commercial property taxes. And that's why our residential taxpayers are feeling the burden. So we have to grow the grand list on the commercial side, and we're going to do that through economic development. The key to our financial survival is economic development. So bringing in a lot of programs, we have the Community Investment Fund at the state of Connecticut. It's $175 million that is geared towards helping distressed municipalities. We're going to tap into that. Advanced CT, which is an organization that helps cities bring in business. And then my experience on the Bonding Commission and economic development, I've had the great opportunity to see development across the state and really working with those developers and those investors, bringing them to West Haven and focusing on our business corridors in West Haven, our Boston Post Road, our center, Frontage Road, Front Avenue, and of course, the Haven. Thanks for the question.
And thank you for taking Rich's call. Thank you for calling in, Rich. I appreciate it. If anybody else has any more questions for Rep. Bohr or even Barry Lou Cohen, who's coming on next, the Republican candidate, give us a call, 888-720-9677. You talked about development. This is important. I wanted to get into this. A number of development projects either stall or get abandoned in recent years, including around the city's train station. And also the site of a proposed shoreline outlet mall, the Haven. I think you just alluded to the Haven. Mm-hmm. What are your plans for promoting economic development in West Haven?
Well, we have to get our house in order first. We want to, I talked about bringing the team in because we have to make sure we have a structure in place. We also don't have a good reputation for doing business in West Haven, so we have to streamline that so that investors and developers want to come back. I've also looked at the asked Department of Economic Development for the list of investors and developers across Connecticut, and I'm going to work with them, and I'm going to bring them and show them all of our areas that are ripe for development and public-private partnerships across the city. I have had successfully have brought in $24 million in project funding for West Haven, but there hasn't been a project manager on the ground to move those projects forward. So a lot of that funding is just sitting there. And that's why that's key. Before we invite the developers, we have to make sure we have that structure that's going to move those projects along. The Haven, it's 26 acres on the wharf, on and off the highway, in a city with a great train station. The city really should have been working with the Simon Group. Those are the owners of the property, to market and promote. I know they're a private owner and that would be a private sale, but we should have been partnering with them to attract and sell West Haven so we have the right developers there.
So the kind of like the poster child, besides the Haven, obviously, for this kind of stall in development has been, in the last couple of years at least, one of them has been this New England Brewing Company project. I'm sure you've heard a lot about this, Rep. Poor. But you got the New England Brewing Company. For those of you out there that may not know about it, there's that beer called Sea Hag. It's a black can that people might have had before. And they want to put a tap room at the old Savin Rock Conference Center. So I guess yesterday there was a public hearing on this. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened at the public hearing and where you fall on this project and whether or not there should be a tap room here?
Yeah, sure. So this project has been going on for over a year with the developers and NEBCO working with the city council, and it's gone back and forth because of public pushback on large manufacturing down there, and then they scaled down the project, and then the contract was falling apart because of the financial aspect. So a couple of weeks ago, they had said that they were going to walk away from the project. So Senator Maroney who knows them, who was working with them, and had a conversation and said, let's work with the state. So Senator Maroney called me, asked me if I could work with the governor on funding for the project. I had the governor come down and see the conference center, which is on our beautiful shoreline, but is a really eyesore. I walked him around the project. We went and had some coffee, talked about it. And he said, what could I do to help? And I said, we need some funding to move the project forward. So a couple of days later, he called up. He said, we have the funding. That changed the terms of the contract. And then last night, the city council got to see that new contract, and the public came forward, overwhelmingly supported the project, and it finally passed. And I think the vote was unanimous. So, we have this beautiful shoreline. We have the longest usable coastline in the state, and that's our claim to fame. And we have all different sections that can be developed, sections that can't, right, where there's homes or there's restricted space. But the conference center is certainly one of those locations that can be developed. And right down the street is Beach Street, and that is an area that I've been focused on as a state representative, and that will complement the conference center. I was able to secure $5 million to raise the road, which was a springboard for developers that are now down there and creating, a business corridor down there.
So I ask you these questions about development. I want to just tie this all together now in a neat bow. So you talk about the reputation, but there's the reputation and then the oversight. I think as Brian Zahn in the New Haven Register had it, you guys are the only municipality now with the Tier 4, the dreaded Tier 4 status, where you pretty much have full oversight by the State Municipal Accountability Review Board. So is that impacting business, do you think? What can you tell me about that?
Well, just to go back, to building trust and tying it into economic development, when I met with the governor to talk about the conference center, what we talked about is West Haven needs a win, right? We need to show that we can actually close a deal. We need a win so investors and developers know they can work with us. So that will build trust, being able to move those developments forward so other developers want to come. When it comes to the MARB, we unfortunately are in Tier 4. I think it's been an adversarial relationship between the mayor and the MARB, often the city council and the MARB as well. And again, my opponent was on the city council working with the MARB, and that didn't go so well when we went from Tier 3 to Tier 4. And I don't know that scares developers. Hopefully developers look at that as, West Haven has had long-time structural problems, but with the MARB in place, that's what their goal is, to change that. So hopefully investors and developers can see that the future, with changing our financial controls and doing business differently and ethically, they can invest in West Haven.
All right, I want to spend the final couple of minutes here trying to get into education. Board of Education Chair Neil Cavallaro, he recently told the New Haven Register that West Haven Public Schools, they've been flat funded since 2017. Will you inject more money into local education? How are you going to try to do that?
Well, the state budget, which, I was obviously co-sponsor and a voter on, provided $5 million more for our education system in the next 2 years. So we provide the funding to the city, and then it's up to the city and the Board of Ed to allocate that where appropriate. So certainly I've been a champion of education. As a PTA parent, I sat on our local Board of Education for 4 years, so certainly understand the challenges of our children in the city, the challenges of our teachers, our paras, our nurses. So, and have worked on funding at the state level for our schools as well. School security, I was on the school security task force, air quality for our schools, which is critical, mental health. We passed one of the greatest mental health bills for youth in our schools. So I think I have a proven record of being a champion for education and our educators. And I certainly will continue on that path as mayor.
I want to make you think about the 9 schools here in the district, and I want to know how you're thinking about each of those 9 schools as you craft your plans to tackle education. How is there going to be equity?
Well, we have a very diverse population. We have Title I schools, right, that have challenges, and we are, I think, 68% minority, which is a misnomer, a minority majority in our school system. So what we have to do is make sure we have leadership in place that represent that diversity, so that our students can look at folks that represent them as role models. So we want to make sure we're hiring in a reflection of the population that are in our school systems. And we have significant issues with food insecurity in our school system. We're 13% of food insecure amongst our families, and that's a real critical issue. We have transportation problems.
Interrupting you just for a second to let you know you
Sure.
got 30 seconds. Keep going, because we got the clock, but you got it. 30 seconds.
Okay. And language barriers as well. So we have to make sure that we have the language programs in place so that our families and our parents can help with their children's education.
This was a terrific conversation. Thank you so much, State Rep Bohr, for coming on and joining us on the Wheelhouse this morning.
Okay, great. Thanks, Frank.
That was State Representative Dorinda Bohr, Democratic nominee for mayor in West Haven. Thank you so much for coming on again. And thank you for talking about your campaign. Up next, you're going to hear from Dorinda Bohr's opponent, Barry Lee Cohen, the Republican nominee. And you could join the conversation if you want. 888-720-9677. 888-720-9677. This is the Wheelhouse from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Frankie Graziano. And to start this week's show, you got to hear from Dorinda Bohr, a Democrat. Wow, I'm having some fun today talking. A Democrat running for mayor in West Haven. Must be the chilly fall air. Now you're going to hear from the other candidate in this race. With me now is Republican nominee for mayor in West Haven, Barry Lee Cohen. Good morning, Barry. How are you today?
Good morning, Frankie. Thank you so much for having me, and good morning to your viewers.
And thank you. And I'm excited to talk to you. And now that you're talking about the viewers, let's invite them to give us some phone calls. 888-720-9677. 888-720-9677. Barry, I'm going to give you the first shot here to give us an idea of who you are and why you want to be mayor.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm Barry Lee Cohen, and I am a lifelong resident of West Haven. I have decades of community service and philanthropic efforts in the community. I've also been a global executive for a $1.2 billion corporation, specifically a $500 million company that right in West Haven, where I was on a management team. And believe me, when it comes to West Haven, I am all in. I know economic development in my position, business development, personnel, operational excellence, being a 2-time award winner of a 4,800 person population at the time. I'm also one of those guys that rolls up their sleeves and gets the job done. Should it be a park restoration? Should it be the fiscal conservative, the tax fighter on the council? Basically looking for transparency and getting, ensuring that there are certain ethics that are followed. I'm also a community guy. Should it be on the community house? Should it be on the Ward Heitman House? Should it be on the Chamber of Commerce? It's not what you're on, it's what you do. Public service is a blessing that I hold dear. You know, my professional background, along with my community background, along with my government service background, I'm just so proud to be running for mayor today. I'm proud to be a Westie, and we need change.
You're telling me you're all in? I want to know if you got 10 toes in on financial responsibility and transparency.
Absolutely. And let me just say, we want to talk about transparency. I heard my opponent say a couple of things. First of all, I was on the council for one term. This whole thing with Marvin Tier 4, I wasn't even on the council for that. The other thing that is just so silly is, yes, the council, which was made up of 13 individuals, including people on her own ticket, including people that are going to be on her own team, if you will.
Let me ask you about Marvin a little bit, though, because I just want to get a general a general idea of where you are on financial responsibility and transparency. Go ahead.
Well, financial responsibility and transparency are key, because what we've lost from our residents and what we have lost from business and corporations, key stakeholders, is trust and confidence. We need to make sure that we have a team in there that is respected and that knows what they're doing. There's been, we talk about the culture of corruption. It's really been the culture of incompetence. And that really, in some cases, well-meaning people just not getting the job done or being not resourced enough. And I'll tell you something, within the budgets themselves, there's been a lot of sandbagging, to be putting in budgets such things as increases for elected officials for raises that shouldn't happen, which I stopped. Basically putting in false revenues for the Haven that never happened of $1 million. That's got to stop. To be doing budgeting where you basically plug in, 2-3% increases for all departments versus zero-based budgeting that you have to justify your expenses. You do need financial controls, absolutely, because it's your tax dollars. It's not the city's tax dollars. It is your tax dollars have to be spent responsibly. Also, there's a number of things when we get into economic development is the feasibility of certain expenses that we'll get into later. There are things such as sales of public property that should not be included in the budget that haven't happened yet. I'm actually known, it's kind of a joke. I'm actually known in business and my corporate life and also in my, if you will, my nonprofit life, if you will, for my colonoscopies. I go through every line of the budget. I mean, there is such waste in the budget sometimes. Like, for instance, there was one year that I was, for the 2-year term that I was on there.
Is it Cohenoscopy or colonoscopy?
I call it a colonoscopy.
Is it Cohen, like your last name, or?
You got it.
Boy.
I'm very, very thorough. It's one of those things that I look at every line of that budget. You take a look at our lighting budget, $100,000 for lighting, and we're basically bragging about our solar program, and we go up.
I got you popping in and out. So during this question, I'm going to see if you could maybe enhance your connection a little bit. But
okay.
From colon cleansing and colonoscopies here to the recent scandals in West Haven, how are you going to give the city a fresh start? How are you going to rebuild trust with residents?
Well, that's exactly right. We're going to rebuild trust with residents because we are a new team. The other team that's been in, including Dorinda's team, it's the same people. Republican or Democrat, it really doesn't make a difference. When you have the same people for 34 years, same people, different seats, you're not going to regain the public trust. The party that basically that shattered the public trust simply cannot repair it. If you take a look at Dorinda's ticket, 2/3 of those people on her ticket are recycled from past administrations and the current administrations. Same people, different seats. What we're going to basically do is there's a number of things. From day one, we're going to reach out to residents and businesses. We are going to have everything we'll talk about later in terms of speaking with some of the key business and stakeholders throughout the region, not just the city. You have to have a regional approach to say that we're open to business. One of the things that my core competency is, I know economic development. I know business development and engagement. I've been on economic development task force. And what we're going to do is we're going to start reaching out to these people so we know the questions to ask, like how can we create value for both of us so that we can both win? What do you need? I understand technology, I understand industrial, I understand business. It's not one of these things that you're a legislator and you just basically show up, a few months before an election or a few years before an election. It takes decades to build these partnerships and relationships, to build that trust and confidence. It's more than just grants. It's more than just it's really we and working together for a common goal. There is also going to be, one of my specialties is I'm an award-winning marketer. And I talk about marketing and operations, but I'm an award-winning marketer that we're going to have a West Haven 2.0 program or reset program for West Haven because we don't showcase ourselves. There is such unbelievable potential in West Haven. And right now we are a city of missed opportunity. We're hard to do business with. We don't pick up the phone. We don't return emails. It takes an act of God sometimes to get a variance passed or a law passed, or I should say, or an application passed to be able to build in West Haven.
Barry, I got to jump in because we got a lot of things happening here because we do actually, in a second, we're going to take a phone call in a couple of seconds. But before that, let me go to a question that we had earlier that was asked to Dorinda Bohr from Rich in West Haven. He was asking about reducing the tax burden in West Haven. How are you going to approach that?
Well, you know what? Absolutely. First of all, we're going to have those financial controls and some of the things I talked about, but it all really comes down to right now, the tax burden on individual residences are much too high, especially those with single family homes. And even those that are renting, your rents are going up. We need economic development. We have to hit the ground running so that we can establish ourselves to spread that tax burden more equally. We attract business, not only attracting business, but also the types of grants that we have to improve the infrastructure, utilities, some of the things that basically established communities that people want to move here, live here, eat here, not go back to Hartford, not go back to New Haven, or I should say, or Stanford. So we have to be an attractive town to work, live, and thrive. And so between economic development, we'll be able to improve the quality of life. Also, a focus on safety. Safety is so important right now. That, our police team, if you will, they're heroes, they're great guys, but they are understaffed, and we are competing against other communities across the state, and we have to take care of them and take care of them well. And we're not doing that this way. And there's going to be incentives that I will be looking at, with that team to make happen.
And Barry, you got yourself a phone call here. We got Rosalind from West Haven who wants to ask you about the waste crisis in the city. Go ahead, Rosalind.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. What I'm really curious about is how you're going to address the impending waste crisis. We just participated in a composting pilot, but we only had 20% participation, where other towns I read had up to 60. So it's not only what are we going to do about our waste, but how are you going to manage public perception around different ideas and innovative strategies to manage waste?
Rosalind, thank you for that call. Rosalind's talking about these green bags you got in the city that you put food scraps in, and the orange bags that you have that have trash. Talk to us about food scrap diversion.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I really appreciate that. In terms of the program itself, obviously, it's gotten suspended, but first of all, the communication of any program is key. And I think things were miscommunicated or weren't communicated at all, and there was lots of confusion. That's one of the things that really has to be worked on. Also, simplification of the program itself, because some people found it to be confusing or complicated, again, due to lack of communication. There's also a transfer station as part of the ARPA funding. There's $1 million that was put aside that is going to be built for a transfer station, which I think will allow for a much more ease of use in terms of, and also more cost-effective way of disposing our materials. Should they be, recyclable? Should they be mattresses? Should they be tires? Should they be oils? Should they be, whatever, green bag, white bag, or whatever? That is also going to allow us a much more robust, recyclable, reclaim sustainability program here in West Haven, which lacks. And I look at Orange right next door that they have transfer station, and you can kind of see the difference. What's also going to do is based on our transfer station and capabilities of it, we're going to take a look at other towns and cities that may wish to access and pay for our services. That's something that can be taken a look at. Right now, it's premature. It's something that we're really taking a look at in terms of there. And by the way, my background in industry, I do have background in terms of green technology, sustainability, things of that nature, which really do stem from the chemical industry. And
we got you jumping in and out a little bit, so let me try to ask you a prolonged question to see if you could double check on that connection. But we talked with Dorinda a second ago. We were talking about the New England Brewing Company and their lease agreement that they had in place, and this great big old public hearing that they had in the city yesterday. And then, of course, there's the Haven Shoreline Project. Meg Dalton was pointing out in this question that we asked earlier about this economic zone that you have downtown near the train station, and there not being development there. So kind of help us out here and understand about some development and some plans that you have to try to spur that.
Yeah, I'll take each one at a time. I'm going to make sure I get them all. In terms of the NEPCO thing, let's set the record straight here. Dorinda Bohr, it was really James Maroney who did all the heavy lifting and the work. You'll notice that last night's hearing that basically the mayor, as well as NEPCO, thanks James Maroney, because Dorinda Boer for the last year, 2 months, had no interaction at all with NEPCO. The picking up the phone thing is just basically politics as usual. That yes, the governor did come down, but the deal was already done, and she really has to stop. Really just setting the record straight. That's really unfortunate that she's doing that. In terms of, I am for the brewery. The one thing about the brewery that I do want to bring up is yes, the $900,000 was done. Back and forth about what should have gone where, but that's great. The other thing too is, if I were mayor, that didn't happen here, was being a leader. Being mayor is being a leader, not just a legislator. And being a leader, there was another $600,000 that wasn't talked about that went directly to NEPCO to basically do what it wanted to in operations or manufacture, whatever, outside of West Haven. Well, I think I would have negotiated that, saying you want the other $600,000. That's great, but we have plenty of open warehouses, plenty of buildings, plenty of land where that manufacturing could be done there, because as you know, manufacturing was a concern on the shoreline. Put it down, but leadership is really making those tough decisions and really knowing how to lead. In terms of I'm
going to give you just a few more seconds to answer this question, because I really want to talk to you about education, but wrap up here with NEPCO and the development.
In terms of, I'll just go on then. In terms of the train station and so forth, and the Armstrong building, the train station right now is to stop between Hartford and New Haven. We need to basically ensure that we work with people at the Armstrong building, so it's more than just a park. It's just more than just housing, if you will. And that's something we can deal with. In terms of the Haven, yes, it is privately owned property. But I will say one thing, that we are going to be working with the neighborhoods, because it's not a one size fits all. I don't care if it's First Avenue or it's the shoreline. If it's, no matter where you are, every neighborhood's particular is different, and everything's distinct, I should say. You say you're gonna work with the neighborhoods. Okay, so we got 9 schools in the district. Talk to me about equity and helping out some of these schools. Well, in terms of helping out, West Haven is an alliance district, and we get highly funded by the state, in terms of whatever grants that we're, in terms of that. But what it is, and I was on the council too, and I will tell you that I was very concerned about recreational programs, the after-school programs, as well as making sure that that all the schools in all the regions, regardless if you're in Allentown, downtown, or the shore, are treated equitably. Right now in West Haven, some of the, obviously people go to Kerrigan, but that's citywide. They go to Bailey citywide. But as those recreational activities, also, there is a food concern, a hunger concern among some children in terms of getting breakfast. Just about 30 seconds. Just wanted to remind you that you're running out here. Go ahead. And so, so with that, I would tell you that, there is a budget, but I do look at some of the things such as, the teachers, the basic school, so that the school supplies that they basically give to kids out of their own pocket needs to be increased. Some of the transportation budget, some of the handicapped accessibility for some of our children needs to be taken a look at. So yes, we need to be able to fund, but again, it really comes down to growing our revenue streams. And thank you so much. And thank you so much for going. I have to give you the time cue, because we gave Dorinda 15 minutes too. Sure. When we got to field the question there from Rosalind too in West Haven. So I appreciate that very much. Barry, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you so much. You've now heard from both candidates for West Haven's open mayor seat. Election day is November 7th. But before that, we're going to help you digest what the candidates just said. Up next, Jonathan Wharton, Christine Stewart, they're on with me. You can be too. Call 888-720-9677, 888-720-9677. This is the Wheelhouse from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Frankie Graziano. We just heard from both candidates in the West Haven mayoral race. Now we're going to bring on 2 people who can help us unpack what we just heard. Here with us, first of all, in studio, to my left, the boss lady, our resident boss lady on the Wheelhouse, and the editor of CT News Junkie, Christine Stewart. Good morning.
Good morning.
So happy to see you today.
Happy to see you.
So much natch energy, as I like to say. Just a lot of natural energy. And Jonathan Wharton, the preppy prof, he's in no rush for pumpkin spice.
Never. Not. I am now that it's finally October. So I.
I'm giving you a plug here. What publication was it in? Your opinion piece that you had on pumpkin spice?
Oh, it was in Hearst. So it was in Connecticut Mirror and excuse me. I'm messing this up. Connecticut Post and New Haven Register.
All right, so he moonlights in newspapers talking trash about the fall, but he's the associate professor of political science and urban affairs at Southern Connecticut State University for his day job. Good morning, Jonathan. How are you today?
Good morning, Frankie, and good morning, Christine.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Anybody wants to talk to the three of us, you can join the conversation, 888-720-9677, 888-720-9677. Jonathan, I want to invoke the last time that we talked. Christine was in on this conversation, too. It was on August 9th, about the mayoral elections. You wondered aloud about that financial scandal that we were talking about in West Haven and how it would impact turnout there. We've had about 2 months since then. What can you tell me about things you've heard about turnout and the financial issues in West Haven?
Well, unfortunately, things haven't changed too much. And of course, many reporters, as you already know, Frankie and Christine, have said that, well, at least with the current mayor, Nancy Rossi, that right now is just kind of a lame duck session in many respects for the council and for the mayor's office. So there hasn't been much movement. And unfortunately, the turnout was not as significant as it could have been in the primaries. And it was a pretty competitive primary on the Republican side. Obviously, Dorinda was able to, seize at least the endorsement before even the primary coming from local Democrats.
So that's what I've been wondering, Jonathan, is that it's been 30 years since they've had a Republican mayor there. Barry Lee Cohen only lost to Nancy Rossi by 32 votes. Does the COVID scandal and the COVID funds then translate to any Democrat, whether it's
that's something,
Dorinda
right,
or not? I mean, does it kind of, do voters think about associating the Democratic Party with that debacle rather than going and voting for a person?
Well, I think the thing is that in West Haven, I think we all know, is pretty nuanced. It's very complex because it's not so much about the partisanship as it is more about personalities on both sides of the aisle. Barry certainly mentioned that Democrats have been in power for a while, as you're indicating, right now, Christine. But the Republicans have also remained very divisive. There were multiple candidates for that primary, and still even at the local convention. So it's very complicated with both parties, but especially on the Republican line.
You talked about that. There was Barry Lee Cohen. He had a 327 vote win in the Republican primary. Only about 1,100 votes in that primary. We're talking about turnout here. 23% of Republicans in West Haven turned out for that one in September. 32%, I think you mentioned this 2 years ago when Nancy Rossi edged Cohen.
32 votes.
32 vote separation, and then it was a 32% turnout that day. So what do we think about turnout, guys? What do we think? Christine, you go first. Do we think that is anybody going to turn anybody out in November? I'm thinking about the way I asked that now, but are voters going to turn out in November?
It's a municipal election year. Turnout in municipal election years tends to linger in the teens and the 20s. So they're really going to have to work in order to get their voters to the polls. And, maybe Democrats have an advantage on that. Being able to get voters to the polls in the state of Connecticut for Democrats has been a little bit easier than it is to get Republicans to the polls. But, independents in either of these cases could make the difference, obviously, because they do represent the bulk of the voters. And are they concerned with the fiscal malfeasance, and do they tie that to the Democratic Party?
You saw me in the studio. You're sitting to my left right now. So you were saying something very serious, and you were very legitimately breaking down this race and how people are going to vote. And I smiled while you were saying that because I had just forgotten that Barry Lee Cohen was talking about how he's a specialist in colonoscopies. So that brings me to my next question.
I thought
what do
he
you
said
think about
colonoscopy? So I was very confused by that.
Well, I made the connection right away because his last name is Cohen, and I'm like, is this a thing? Is this maybe that's going to bridge the 32 vote gap that he had? What do you guys think about candidates' plans to address financial responsibility and transparency? Jonathan, you go first.
That's critical. That's got to be tackled because that's been an ongoing saga for years, and things have not gotten any better, unfortunately, in that area. And I'm glad that you all, were very resolute to point out the economic development concerns, because this is kind of it's been an ongoing saga as well. There have been a lot of starts and stops on these development projects. And so you need to, have more properties on that grand list, obviously, so there can be revenue coming in. And yet both candidates have offered and said over and over again that West Haven's got all this great potential. It's just not seized it. So this is really critical to grow that. Otherwise, what can you do beyond getting more scrutiny from the state, from MARB?
And can they seize on that if they are still under the control of the MARB? I mean, can they seize on? Obviously, it's all private sector at this point, but can they encourage that? And do those investors look at the current state oversight situation and say, maybe I'm going to take my money elsewhere?
Right, which has been that's been a concern over and over again, and yet that's not been something. I mean, there's got to be more trust.
So who is more convincing? Which candidate is more convincing in that regard, and do you think would be able to get that private sector investment?
It's a good point, right, Christine? I think that both of them bring to the table their experiences, but that trust factor's got to be, I think, coming from first the voters, right? That's got to shore up first before even getting those developers and investors there, because it remains still divisive among so many voters.
But can we drill in a little bit more on MARB? Something that Dorinda was talking about earlier was that she felt that Nancy Lee Rossi and City Council were kind of adversarial with MARB. So just can you guys each take us into this dynamic? Go ahead, Christine.
Yeah. So the MARB is the municipal oversight board of the state. And so the Office of Policy and Management scrutinizes various communities that come within, a fiscal risk. And they go over their finances, and either the official in the town cooperates, and I think that we saw the oversight with Hartford, and that they cooperated, and they're actually leaving now with
West Haven's the only one that's in Tier 4. That's a lonely place,
right? West Haven is the only one there, so. I think that not cooperating with the state in that regard did hurt the city of West Haven inadvertently.
What about the dynamic between the candidates, Jonathan? We talked about MARB and the jabs that they put on each other about MARB. This is a very contentious issue. How's it playing out on the campaign trail, Jonathan?
Yeah, and it should be, because a part of it is that obviously with Dorinda, she's been a state lawmaker, throughout all this, and obviously Barry, had pointed out that, even when this did take place, it didn't take place under his watch as a councilman. But, he might have served only one term. So, they're going to be pointing out both sides of this, which shouldn't be so surprising. And it's an issue that just won't go away. And I think rightfully so, because even whoever's going to be in the mayoral office, they're going to still have that scrutiny taking place, whichever candidate's going to be the one to win.
Do you think voters go into the polls with that kind of, thinking about that information, which candidate is going to be better for the fiscal health of my town so that I don't have to pay as many taxes?
Exactly. No, I don't think so. In West Haven, I think we all know it is so personal politics that it comes down to, not even partisan, not even MARB. It's going to be a matter of how the candidates come across in terms of personality.
We might jump around here in the next couple of minutes here as we finish up, but a caller asked Barry about the waste crisis in West Haven. As I mentioned, you got the orange bags for trash, green bags for food scraps. It's all because of tipping fees, right? Because as we know, the state's paying so much money, these municipalities are paying so much money per ton of waste that they send out of state to landfills. So this is a legit thing, right, guys? Do we know how Dorinda may be thinking about this, Jonathan? Christine, do you know how Representative Bohr might be thinking about it?
Well, I mean, there were only a few communities that got, I think it was like as little as like $5 million to do the food scrap. This is only a pilot program.
20 municipalities?
Yeah. Oh, it was 20 municipalities? Well, I mean, this is a statewide crisis. I mean, there are no public facilities anymore to send your trash to. And there's no landfills in Connecticut to send your trash to. So we're paying for all 800,000 tons of trash to be shipped out of state every year. And what happens when those states we're shipping them to says, no thanks, Connecticut, we don't want your trash.
What do you got, Jonathan?
No, one thing that I think is important to come out of that, too, is, the concerns that surround even the waste management surrounding the water issue there in West Haven, right? Because and they certainly have that facility right on the Sound. And so that's been an ongoing issue, too. So
and dumping, right? They're watching out for illegal dumping a lot down there.
Absolutely. And that's something that it's going to be an ongoing issue too, right there. And again, we're back to that, economic development concerns that surround what's going to happen around the beach area too. So you can't avoid any of that in West Haven. No doubt about it.
All right. I got about 3 minutes left, so I want to take 2 of those 3 minutes here to talk about education, funding for local schools. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Well, I mean, they're an alliance district, so they are getting a few additional dollars from the state for that purpose. But obviously, education very important and tied to the tax dollars and the tax revenue. So it goes back to a financial question: can they expand their tax base so that at some point the tax burden falls over into the commercial payers and not onto the residential?
Is this more about equity, Jonathan? Is this more about maybe getting more money for like the Allingtown part of town or this or that? Should there be some more support for other parts of the town rather than some of these other school districts?
That's one thing, especially even beyond the schools. I mean, that's been an ongoing saga with like the senior center and certainly with the library over there in Allingtown. But I do want to also stress that at least I think the unique thing about West Haven is that they have that brand new high school, which is just, tremendous, right? And how do you seize on the potential around that? And yes, obviously there was a lot of state money in that direction too. But one thing that West Haven has is that they got they can really grow their vocational ed program. They can certainly do a lot more with dealing with the personnel issues surrounding teachers, because there's certainly been as most districts are facing this generational change among the education personnel. So there are a lot of issues surrounding education we can't avoid in West Haven.
Let me call an audible a little bit because I forgot about this insightful question that Meg Dalton asked. This is very important to ask you guys here before we close. Take about 20 seconds, 30 seconds each to do it. How possible is it to have a fresh start in West Haven, given all that's going on there with Marb and obviously the COVID scandal?
I think whoever voters do end up electing is going to have to be somebody that they believe will be able to handle those issues with trust and transparency, while at the same time, being able to grow the economic base in the city.
Jonathan.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight, right? I mean, this is something that can't be done just in one term in terms of dealing with economic development and MARB. This is something where you got to hear from the candidates. It's going to take, long-term strategy planning. And so that's got to be stressed from the candidates for sure.
What a tremendous show. We had Christine Stewart on. She got to come into the studio today. I appreciated seeing her. Jonathan Wharton joining us on Zoom. And the candidates, of course, and you out there listening, giving us phone calls today. Thank you. 888-720-9677. Thank you for calling the number. I want folks not to forget, we'll still be on the campaign trail when you tune in next Wednesday at 9 a.m. for a show packed with candidates running for mayor in another open race, Waterbury. Send us your questions now via email, wheelhouse@ctpublic.org. Today's show was produced by Meg Dalton. Our technical producer is Kat Pastor. Thanks to Tess Terrible for helping us in studio, and Katie Tolarski as well. Our interns are Letitia Peters and Joey Morgan. Special thanks to Sabrina Herrera and our social team this week. Download the Wheelhouse anytime on your favorite podcast app. I'm Frankie Graziano. This is the Wheelhouse. Thanks for listening.